1994, I started getting serious about studying GMOs. I had been selling seed since 1984, and the promises that we were hearing about what genetically modified organism crops or genetically engineered crops would do were intriguing. So we began to study them. It's as a result, primarily, of the experiences that I was able to witness through the eyes of the amazing family farmers all across the U.S. and Canada that I've been able to work with, that I share a lot of that information with you today. I am the primary coordinator and first co-author of a scientific study where we fed GMO and non-GMO crops to pigs for their lifetime as a meat animal, and I'll share that information with you as well. Selling seed in 1984 was different than it is today. And as GMOs came into being, there were a lot of claims. We're going to increase yield, we're going to reduce pesticide use. We cannot feed the world without this. That was the claim that was made and still made to this point in time. In 1997, and I apologize how small some of the print is on this slide here to include things in total. I'll point out the high points to you. 1997, the seed company provided us with the conventional and the BT version of one of the best hybrids they had in the lineup. It was what we called our Old Reliable. It was Golden Harvest 2390. Everything was the same. Same fertility, same herbicide, everything was identical side by side in the plot. At harvest, we had 149 bushels per acre with the non-GMO and 146 with the BT version. The harvest moisture was 16% on the conventional and 21% on the BT. That equated to a 25-cent per bushel dock when we sold the grain. So we lost $57.99 per acre by having that BT hybrid in the field. That couldn't be because we were told it was supposed to yield more. We repeated it the following year. We did the exact same thing. More reliable. As you can see, the seed cost was higher because of the BT. The second year, there was a dramatic difference in the yield, 27 bushels an acre roughly, and the moisture was closer together. But the end result was $58.95. How many people grow corn in the room? How many of you would like to sell corn for $1.65 a bushel? Nobody ever raises their hand when I ask that question. This was a good sound hybrid. The seed company saw these same results everywhere they put this comparison in their company plots. If they had a hybrid that some of my customers would identify as a corn board magnet, in the given year that we had the corn board pressure, that hybrid would falter because of corn board. They put the BT in that, and it may see a positive yield increase in that year when the pressure was there. The aerial applicator says, well, we got one corn board pressure 1 year out of 19 over the last 40 years in this area where it justifies treatment. But now we were to use the insecticide on everything. I firmly believe that farmers are not at fault for what is going on with genetically engineered crops. Because I also believe, based on the study and research and testing that I have been fortunate to be involved in since 1994, that we've not been told the whole story, nor in many instances have we been told the truth. Examples of GMOs crops, the BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, that's a version of an insecticide that they put in the crop. I'm not going to get real in depth on the explanations of the technicalities of this. I'm just going to do this briefly because we have a lot of ground to cover between Dr. Kruger and myself this evening. There's also a rootworm tolerant corn. Every BT crop is registered as an insecticide with the EPA. When they tell us we're lowering insecticide use, they fail to count the amount of insecticide in that Bt toxin that is being applied to all the acres that are being planted to it. The glyphosate-resistant crops, that's the crops that can tolerate an application of Roundup herbicide. Roundup, of course, is a herbicide. It's designed to kill every living plant that it touches, except the ones that are genetically engineered. We have soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, alfalfa, and there are more in the pipeline. The Liberty Link, that's glufosinate is the active ingredient in that. We have Liberty Link corn, soybeans, and cotton. There's also Liberty Link rice, but it's not on the market. Golden rice is one of the poster child crops of the genetically engineered industry. They say, well, we're going to improve the vitamin A content of the crop, and we're going to solve the problems with blindness of the kids in the third world countries. And anybody that's anti-GMO or speaks out and tells the truth about it, you must be wanting to wish harm on those children in those third world countries. Golden rice is not in production yet. And there's a very simple reason why it's not in production. It does not perform agronomically in the field. Every place they've done yield trials and field trials on it, the results, there's no farmers that want to use it. That's in addition to the response of the people where the golden rice is going to be served. They don't want their children used as guinea pigs in an untested product such as this that's going directly into the food chain. We also have papaya, squash, apples, and potatoes that are genetically engineered. Salmon is in the pipeline, it's not yet approved. Increased yield. In the early days of genetically engineered crops, our land-grant universities were able to do research to compare the original isoline to the genetically engineered version. The University of Nebraska had such research. Multi-year data. There was an 8 to 10% yield drag over this 5-year time period with the Roundup Ready soybean. That disappeared one day. Whether it was coincidental or planned, but the language and the technology agreements on the genetically engineered seed changed. And now the researchers at our land-grant universities were no longer allowed to do this comparative research and publish the results unless they had the express written consent and approval of the company that held the patent on the seed. And if they did get the seed to test it, they had to have approval before they printed the results of the study, whether they were good or bad. There was also a report published by the Union of Concerned Scientists in 2009 entitled Failure to Yield. In the independent yield trials, genetically engineered crops do not yield more. There's not one single genetically engineered crop that is statistically consistently proven that it will yield more in an independent trial. Now, being in the seed business up until 2010, that's when I quit, and I was glad I quit because it was complicated beyond description. But anyway, we saw seed companies stacked to death. They put only the best and the latest and the greatest genetics into the genetically engineered crops. So it looked like they were yielding more, but they actually didn't. It wasn't a fair comparison. You didn't have the original isoline and the genetically engineered version to make the comparison on. Herbicide use rates, they were told we're going to reduce that in the early days, and this was a godsend for a lot of farms. It was interesting that why the weeds were there. The Roundup came in and it wiped out everything except the genetically engineered crop. But why were the weeds there? When you really understand and work with the soil, that soil was telling you how imbalanced it is nutritionally and biologically when you have this massive amount of weeds present in the field. Putting on a silver bullet herbicide like Roundup don't solve that underlying problem that was there for the weeds to be existing. But looking at the rate, it was originally 32 ounces per acre. Using the original formulation, not the new and improved condensed versions, by 2010, I know of producers in Ohio that we're putting on as much as 96 ounces of glyphosate per application, and we're making 2 to 3 passes per year to try and control the weeds that were developing resistance to glyphosate. In Argentina in 1996, they started with Roundup Ready soybeans. They had 2 liters per hectare. By 2010, they're up to 10 to 20 liters per hectare. So what was the motivation? As I said, I was in the seed business starting in 1984. When the genetically engineered crops were introduced, we had the seed price and we had the technology price. The technology fee is the cost for the royalty, if you will, on that genetically engineered seed that the farmer pays every single year to the company that holds the patent on that seed. In 2010, when I decided to get out of the seed business, I sat down with a pencil and paper and a big calculator, and I did the math. And I presumed that 100% of the corn, soybeans, cotton, canola, and sugar beets in the United States were going to be planted to the latest and greatest genetically engineered crop. Figured out the planting rates and the amount of tech fee that would generate per acre. I used USDA's figures on figuring this 100% planting rate. Corn, we had 87.9 million acres that year. The tech fee was $60 an acre. That would generate $5,274 million. Soybeans, we had 78.9 million acres, $24 an acre. It was $1,893 million. Cotton, it was only 10.9 million acres at $78 an acre. Chips in 850,000 and change. I was privileged to work with cotton producers in southwest Georgia for 3 years. In 1993, they told me that a 50-pound bag of cottonseed cost between $45 and $60 a bag. In 2010, the seed cost was $159.99. The tech fee is $412.20 a bag. The seed treatment, which is insecticide, fungicide, and nematicide, is $125 a bag. In 2010, they're buying 230,000 seeds per bag, not 50 pounds. That could be from 36 to 48 pounds, depending on the size of the seed. They're paying $697.19 per bag versus $60. Continuing on, the sugar beets, again, presuming 100% utilization in the United States, would chip in 96 million. Canola, we don't have a lot of that in the U.S., but that throws in 9 million. So we subtotal all this in the U.S., again, presuming 100% implementation according to USDA's planted acres, not including the Roundup Ready alfalfa. We have just under $8.7 billion. I've been asked to speak in Canada a number of times. Excuse me. And I did the math on the 2010 canola crop and tech fees of what that would generate in Canada. That's a little over $1.25 billion. So again, presuming 100% planting of all the acres in the U.S. and Canada in 2010, that would generate $9.9 billion tech fee for 1 year. That's not seed, that's not fertilizer, that's not chemical, that's just a technology fee. What could possibly be the motivation behind genetically engineered crops? This slide was given, this graphic was given to me by a retired molecular microbiologist from Washington State University when I was speaking there in September of 2013. I got to this point in time in the presentation and I said, when they genetically engineer a plant, they have a 1 in 100,000 chance of hitting the same spot twice. Dr. Suduka raised her hand and she says, Howard, I would like to correct you. That's not accurate. I am a retired molecular microbiologist. I have done countless genetic engineering insertions in the laboratory. With the technology as it's currently used at this point in time, their odds are not nearly that good. She sent me this graphic and subsequent information in an email that it's 1 in a trillion to 1 in 100 trillion chance that they're going to get it in the same spot twice in the DNA of that plant. And you may wonder, why is that important? I think you'll see why. As I said, I've been privileged to work with family farmers all across the country since 1992 in crop and livestock production. 1998, we get a call from a hog farmer in Nebraska, planted his first BT corn. Put his BT corn in one bin, he put the conventional corn in the other bin. ground a batch of feed for the sows. He was going to turn the boar in them, with them and breed them. Took the BT corn, fed it to the sows. His conception rate dropped 30% on that group of sows from what he was used to seeing. Called us up. I said, we've been hearing some issues. Don't use that again. South Dakota, a different year, a different BT corn. Computerized record-keeping system in this very top-notch hog production facility. When they fed BT corn, they saw 1.6 pigs less per litter, and the weight of the pig was lighter when they were born. In southwest Iowa, a year later, a different BT corn, they had something called pseudo-pregnancies. This gentleman was getting no pigs. The sows appeared to be bred. They'd go through the full gestation cycle, and upon delivery, they would deliver the afterbirth in a sack of water. The veterinary, the university, everybody was involved with trying to figure out this problem. He was a member of the Farm Bureau. A reporter with the Farm Bureau spokesman came out, did a story on his plight with his hogs. After that story comes out, he starts getting phone calls from how many different hog producers in the counties around him. They were all experiencing the same problem. They finally get together and start talking, and again, the vets and the university, they run all the tests, they couldn't figure anything out. These farmers realized they're all feeding the exact same BT corn. The university said there's no way there could be any connection whatsoever. When the farmers quit feeding that BT corn, that problem went away, but there could not be a connection. In our part of Iowa, when the genetically engineered feedstuffs went into the rations, we would see a higher frequency and incidences of digestive issues. Ileitis, salmonella, bloody bowel, ulcers were typically prevalent in the pigs that died based after they had this series of ill health effects. Foreign proteins are potentially going to be present in every genetically engineered crop that is produced with the technology as it has been utilized to this point in time today. That's why it's so important what Dr. Suduka told me. They put it in a different spot every time. They cannot control where it goes. So that can be a constant change in that protein makeup of the fruit of this plant. That foreign protein, based on the research, the very first early unbiased research that was done on genetically engineered crops by Dr. Pustai in 1999, he was very concerned about the ill effects of this foreign protein on the immune system of the mammal that consumed the fruit of this plant. And he said it wasn't the BT, because he tested the natural version of BT on the lab animals. It was, in his belief, the insertion process that was causing the problem. They could take the same gene from one plant that was already in another plant, put it in, use the technology as they were using it, and cause this foreign protein. Well, we saw this consistency of the irritation, inflammation in the digestive tract, and this was challenging the immune system of the animal. 70 to 80% of the immune system is in your digestive tract. Do we have an increase in autoimmune issues in our country today compared to what it was in 1996 before we had ingredients from genetically engineered crops in 75 to 80% of the processed food in the grocery store? Do you know anyone with an autoimmune issue in your family? I had the privilege to take a tour of a hog slaughter plant in 2008. If you recall, 1998 was when we saw our first problems. The reason I was touring this hog slaughter plant, they were going to do custom processing for us. We were raising our version of natural pork. And I was waiting for the veterinary who was going to give us a tour of the plant. We're in the conference room, and I'm explaining to the plant manager who I knew. And he said, well, what makes your natural pork different than all the other natural pork? Well, we had the minimum claims, no antibiotics, no animal byproducts. And what was there more to it? Well, we not only would not feed GMOs, we also tested the grain that we fed for chemical residue, and there was no chemical residue present in the soil or in the grain. And I was starting to explain to him the development of the irritation, inflammation, and potentially ulcers in the digestive tract because of the foreign proteins of the GMO. This was our belief. And the veterinary, Dr. McGuire, walks in, and he's listening to this explanation. He gets this real funny look on his face. And I interpret it to say, well, you know, this guy fell off the back of the pickup and hit his head a little too hard. But, you know, I'm used to that. I get that look a lot. I interpreted it wrong. He showed us every single part of that hog and how they use it. The only thing they throw away is the eyelids. They cannot disinfect the hair on the eyelid. They cut the eyelid off and it falls on the floor. Everything else is used for something. We get to the part where they have the stomachs. And I had the good fortune of working for Dr. Newman, who's listed on here. He helped me with the interpretation of the pictures I'm going to show you. I worked for him for 8 years. He'll be 89 on his next birthday. No, he just turned 89, excuse me. He's still sharp as a tack. He told me when he graduated from vet school, there was 2 things to veterinary medicine: environment and nutrition. I have kept that in my mind in all aspects of dealing with the soil and animals and people and what have you at this point in time. He was the only one that could tell me what a healthy hog stomach looked like. All of the younger vets were seeing what I'm going to show you has now become normal. This is what a healthy, non-GMO fed hog stomach should look like. Notice the overall skin tone color of the stomach. This yellow mucus over here is normal. That's there because there's no feed in the stomach to digest. The amino acids and the enzymes are still producing that mucus. This is a drug-free fed pig that was fed GMOs, presumably. I say presumably because the company that had all of the drug-free hogs custom slaughtered at this facility, none of them had restrictions on feeding GMOs. 75+% of the corn was GMO at that time, and 85+% of the soybeans were GMO, so it was safe to presume that it was GMO. You can see by the redness, the irritation, inflammation, that, you know, that pig maybe would have benefited a little bit from Pepto-Bismol. This is another one. And this one, you can see pinpoint ulcers here, here, here. This was a full bleeding ulcer at one point in time. This is a pig that was then fed antibiotics for the duration of his lifetime up to the withdrawal date. You can see that the antibiotics helped in reducing that redness, irritation, inflammation, but right dead center there's an ulcer. This is the worst pig stomach that I took a picture of all of the antibiotic-fed pigs. I remember the first time I gave a presentation similar to this. It was to a group of farmers in South Dakota, and there was a gentleman in the room, and he raised his hand when I showed that slide, and he said that I've worked with pigs all my life. He says, there's no way that pig should be alive. I said, trust me, he's not. I shared this information with Dr. Laning, a PhD, soil microbiologist, good friend, excellent scientist, researcher. And I was calling it circumstantial and coincidental that these problems would exist on a high frequency when genetically engineered crops were in the feedstuffs for the animals. She said, Howard, the correct scientific term for that is anecdotal. Now set up the protocols and do a scientific study. So we did. Dr. Judy Carmen, who's in the background here, is the lead scientist on our study. We set up the protocols. We had 84 pigs fed non-GMO corn and soy for their lifetime, from the day they was weaned off mama till the day they went to the harvest slaughter plant, and 84 that were fed GMO. And we had 2 licensed practicing veterinaries. This is Dr. Robinson. He did all the inspection on the stomachs. We weighed and tested all of the organs that it was applicable to do, combined all of that information, and the study was published in 2013. Again, this is what a healthy pig stomach should look like. This is one that was classified as having severe inflammation. The statistical findings of the study: the GM-fed pigs were 2.6 times more likely to have severe inflammation in their stomach. The males were 4 times more likely, and the females were 2.2 times more likely. There's something that jumped out at me at one of the presentations I was doing in California when this happened. The autism rate in boys is significantly higher than it is in girls. And my MD friends tell me that's because of the testosterone levels that happens. But we saw this trend in pigs. Do you know how close the digestive system to a pig is to what we have? They're maybe the more perfect model for doing research than what a rat or a mouse might be. The other statistical finding we found, significant from a scientific standpoint, the GM-fed females, the weight of their uterus was 25% abnormally heavy compared to the average uterus weight of the non-GM-fed pigs. Those are the two scientific findings of the study. We didn't expect to find this. And I protested when Dr. Pustek tweaked our protocol before we went forward with the study. He said, you have to weigh these pigs every week. I said, well, I'm going to weigh them in the nursery, out of the nursery, and when we're done. He said, you have to weigh them every week. I said, you know how much time that's going to take? He said, I don't care, you have to weigh them every week. It was the best thing he could have told us to do. When they were small, we picked them up, we put them on the scale, wrote down their number, wrote down their weight. When they got bigger, as you see here, they went through this simple maze. It's a circle corral. They go in there, they come down the alley, get on the scale, write down the ear tag, write down the weight, they go on their way. The people that are weighing these pigs did not know who was fed what, but the pigs were in the same pen every day. And when they took them out of the pen, they knew this pen and this pen would go through this simple maze quicker, with less hassle, than the ones in this pen and this pen. This is a simple maze to navigate. Pigs are creatures of habit. This pen and this pen not only couldn't perform that simple task, they were irritable. As soon as you got them in confined quarters, they were fighting and biting and picking on one another. When they were back in their normal surroundings, they didn't exhibit the level of contentment that the other pigs did. The scientific journal would not let us include this in the paper because our protocol wasn't set up in a manner to measure it. From 1998 to 2013, that's the time period between which we saw problems in livestock relative to genetically engineered crops in their diet. That's 15 years between seeing the problem and having valid science to verify it. There's a thing that we try to use on our farm, it's called common sense. We don't have 15 years to wait. So I'm going to be completely unscientific, which is easy for me to do because I'm not a scientist, but I'm privileged to work with a lot of excellent scientists. I know of scientific research that has been conducted since this point in time that is specifically set up to measure behavioral issues. And I cannot tell you the results of those studies until they're published, but I can tell you this, or I can ask you this question. Think back to 1996. How many kids in our schools, how many people in your church, in your town, were taking medication for ADHD, autism, or some other mental disorder? And compare that to what we're seeing today. Could there be a connection between 75 to 80% of the processed food containing ingredients from genetically engineered crops and the health of the people, especially the children? Glyphosate, as I said, the active chemical ingredient, Roundup herbicide. Dr. Huber's going to talk much more about that. Killed everything it touched in the beginning. This is a picture of the amaranth pigweed, southwest Georgia. You can put a gallon of glyphosate on that per acre and you won't touch it. It'll look like it's been fertilized. When it grows up, it gets to be big. It used to be 3 foot tall. When it was full grown and have about 100,000 seeds, now it can get 8, 10, 12 feet tall and will have over 500,000 seeds. Water hemp, its first cousin in Iowa. This field was sprayed 3 times with glyphosate that year and he couldn't touch that water hemp. He would not tell me how much he put on there. He says, I'm ashamed to tell you. This is what happens when you get it alongside a cornfield. If it has to grow up and compete, it will. We wiped out 85 to 90% of the water hemp in the portion of the farm we were given to implement biological farming techniques on that farm in southwest Georgia, the first year, by applying the right amount and the right form of calcium. He was so calcium deficient that weed was just taken over. We are seeing glyphosate residues virtually everywhere in our country. Paul Capel and his team of U.S. Geological Service scientists published a report. They monitored the air, the rain, and the river in 2010 and 2011 and found significant levels of glyphosate present. The amount in the first inch of rain would equal 0.48 grams. And you're thinking, well, that ain't very much. You're going to learn from Dr. Huber how much that really is. We found glyphosate residues in alfalfa. Non-GMO alfalfa, by the way. The alfalfa was fertilized with poultry litter. There was glyphosate residue in the poultry litter, and the alfalfa crop took it up. We found barley. That's typically because of a desiccant use. They're using glyphosate to kill the crop dead before they harvest it. Guess what? The beer companies are testing for the glyphosate residue in the barley now, I hear. We've had a report from a number of them. The strip tests that they used, their popularity soared in 2012 when this information got out, because glyphosate is a known antibiotic and it will kill the good bugs they need to ferment the barley to make beer. We found glyphosate residue in corn, edible peas, potatoes, soybeans, and more. The manure, as I mentioned, the glyphosate and AMPA. AMPA is amino methylphosphonic acid. That is the compound that glyphosate degrades to as it starts to break down in the soil. In 1994, the EPA said 2 parts per million per day per life would be okay as far as glyphosate residue in your diet. In 1997, they raised the tolerance for glyphosate residue in soy from 1/10 of a part per million to 20 parts per million, a 20,000% increase. Routinely, there has been 17 parts per million of glyphosate detected in soy. Independent scientific research has documented that 1/2 of a part per million causes infertility, killing both the sperm and the egg. Endocrine disruption can begin at 2/10 of a part per million based on scientific research. 2.03 parts per million was the level found that caused deformities and birth defects in frogs and chick embryos by Dr. Carrasco in Argentina. This is from a good friend of mine in Denmark. He contacted me in December of 2011, I believe it was, after I spoke at the Acres USA conference. He switched to non-GMO soy and saw a significant improvement in the productivity of his sow operation. He raises feeder pigs, but he was still getting glyphosate residue in his feedstuffs. Whether it was in the straw they were desiccating the small grain prior to harvest, or there was residue coming up from a burn down application and the subsequent crop was taking up the glyphosate residue. He had from 0.25 to 1.13 parts per million glyphosate residue in the various feedstuffs that he tested. And it was easy for him to keep this because he was capable of holding his year's supply of feedstuffs. So he had the composite sample that he could test, and he knew what it was from throughout that entire year. 0.25 to 1.13 parts per million isn't very much, but this is the variety of the different birth defects that he saw in the pigs that were born from the mothers. He saved all these pigs. This one was born without a head. You can see various deformities there. That one kind of had an elephant trunk. This is known as the Christmas pig. It was born alive. It didn't have any front feet. He's got a video that showed that pig struggling after he was first born. He saved all these pigs, had them in the freezer. He loads them up one day and he takes them to Leipzig University in Germany, the premier university in the country. Dr. Monica Kruger did the testing on it. They found glyphosate levels in the lung, liver, kidney, muscles, brain, intestine, and heart. We've been told by those in whatever position or authority you may make that statement of in the United States, that if you ingest glyphosate, it'll go right through you It'll be in your urine and your feces, it won't bioaccumulate. Is that true? When we find levels higher in different body parts of deformed piglets from mothers that were fed levels far below this? Glyphosate has been detected at 0.12 parts per million in Cheerios. No big deal? Well, what? 0.1 part per million kills the beneficial organisms in your digestive tract that control the opportunistic. Sun Chips has 0.14 glyphosate residue. Breast milk, 30% of the initial sampling that they did, 0.166 parts per million glyphosate residue in the breast milk. They've also found it in the formula that the babies are eating. What do you see in this picture? Combine harvesting. See the dust behind the combine? We've seen a consistency of higher amounts of dust in the glyphosate-tolerant crops. And one gentleman in Northwest Iowa, I recommend every farmer wear one of these when they're handling any grain. I don't care if you're raising non-GMO or not. The mold and the fungi and the opportunistic organisms don't stop at the fence line. And I apologize for this being unable to read, but it was the only way I could get this transferred on here. I'll explain it to you. The gentleman took the dust off the combine when they harvested the Roundup Ready corn on his father's farm. He took the dust off the combine when they harvested the Liberty Link corn on his brother's farm, and he took some hog dust out of the hog confinement building. And he sent them all to Midwest Labs, and he had it analyzed for mold count and ID, and this is the results. They sent a letter back that said, warning, anybody working in an environment where there's over 1,000 CFUs per gram, CFU is colonization forming unit per gram, should have a protective breathing device on when working in that environment. 14,000 CFUs per gram in the hog dust, of that 1,000 is Aspergillus niger. That will cause a persistent cough. They think it's connected to coal miner's lung or possibly hog farmer's lung. The others is 10,000 Aspergillus species and 3,000 penicillium. The Liberty Link glufosinate tolerant corn had 7,200,000 CFUs per gram. 7 million is Aspergillus and 200,000 is penicillium. The Roundup Ready corn is 15,600,000 CFUs per gram, and it's all Aspergillus. Could there be a potential connection to all the crops that are being raised tolerant to glyphosate that are producing this increased mycotoxin and dust-causing mold spores to respiratory challenges of those who live in the rural communities? Glyphosate is used in places we would never imagine. It used to be used on the school grounds in Irvine, California. Thanks to a very bullheaded mother of 3 sons that is a very good friend of mine, they no longer use Roundup on any of the property on the school grounds. This is an interactive slide. I need you to participate with me in this, please. Do you recognize any of the names in the center of the circle?
Yes.
Have you ever seen a commercial on TV or in a magazine that says, if you can't afford your medication cost, contact us, we have a program to assist you? That commercial is sponsored by AstraZeneca Syngenta. Have you ever heard of a product called atrazine? Atrazine is one of the oldest corn herbicides known on the market, made by AstraZeneca Syngenta, and AstraZeneca Syngenta is also the #4 producer of genetically engineered seed. When you hear seed bearer, what's the first thing you think of? Aspirin. Have you ever heard of Bayer Crop Science, the makers of Aztec insecticide, Liberty herbicide, and genetically engineered seed? When you see Pfizer Pharmacia Upjohn, what do you think of? Pardon? Prescriptions, vitamins, somebody usually says Viagra. Did you know that they were the sole parent company of Monsanto at one point in time and they still own 55% of their stock? We have established the fact now that the companies in the center of the circle are all in the pharmaceutical and chemical business. We're going to start with chemical. I would like you to give me one word that you would use to describe a chemical that kills a weed or an insect, and you're describing this chemical to a 5-year-old child. What one word might you use? Poison. Okay, we're using poison to raise crops. What do we raise crops for? Cereal and grain. What do we feed the bulk of the grain to? If there were to be any residual effect of using this poison in raising the crop, do you think it'll be positive or negative? If it's negative and we feed the grain to the livestock and the livestock don't feel good, who do we call for help? When the veterinary comes and looks at the livestock, what might he recommend you give them to make them feel better? What if you want your livestock to grow faster so you can lower your cost of production? What might you give them? What do we raise livestock for?
Okay.
Who eats the meat? If there's a residual effect of using this poison on the crop that might affect the grain, it could affect the livestock, is there a possibility that it could be in the meat? If the people eat the meat and they don't feel good, where do they go? After you go to the doctor, where might he send you with a piece of paper with his autograph on it? Does this present a positive cash flow for the companies in the center of the circle? We'll probably duplicate on this slide, but we like to end our presentations on a bit of a higher note. A gentleman sent this to us, and he found these sacks of ears of corn side by side in the warehouse. This one was non-GMO and this one was GMO, and you see what the mice did. I showed this slide to a group of farmers in Ohio. The gentleman went home and did his own experiment. He raises non-GMO corn. He put a nail on the tree, and that's the cob on the top, and he borrowed as you can see, he can return it. He borrowed the triple stack ear of corn from the neighbor's cornfield, and 9 months later, it's pretty much still intact. We can't feed the world without it. We had a severe drought in 2012 in northwest Iowa, Sioux County is where I live. There's a gravel road right here. This field is 10 years plus history of glyphosate tolerant crops, corn and or soybeans. This field is 10 years plus non-GMO biological farming concepts. This is non-GMO corn. This is triple stack Roundup Ready corn that was sprayed with glyphosate. I was told it was appraised at 29 bushels per acre chopped for silage. You go across the fence to the south from this field, there's another triple stack field of corn sprayed with glyphosate. It was appraised at 27 bushels per acre chopped for silage. You jump the railroad track and go across the fence, there's a field of triple stack Roundup Ready sprayed with glyphosate, appraised at 12 bushels an acre chopped for silage. This field, they settled the federal crop at 109 bushels an acre. 12, 27, 29. He's still trying to figure out what he did wrong. If you would like to further your education and understanding, I have some suggested reading material for you. Seeds of Destruction by William Engdahl gives a very well documented insight into this whole topic of discussion. Seeds of Destruction by William Engdahl. I call this one mandatory reading. It's entitled Our Stolen Future. It's mandatory reading for anyone, in my opinion, that is considering bringing a child into the world. Theo Colburn is one of the authors. She's no longer with us. She passed away last year. It talks about endocrine disrupting chemicals. DDT, PCBs, stabestral, the lingering effects that they can and will have. To the baby in the womb that's exposed to them, it can and will affect not only that child, but that child's children and their children. 3 generations they've proven. Dr. Art Dunham's daughter. Dr. Dunham's a veterinarian in northeast Iowa who's recognized the ill effects of glyphosate in livestock and helped farmers recovered from it for many years. This is an interesting tale of how production agriculture took two different roads. America's two-headed pig. Thank you.